Today, we'll be exploring the fascinating topic of gender development, focusing on how it unfolds from infancy through middle childhood and into adolescence. This journey will take us through the different stages where gender shapes children's experiences, behaviors, and interactions, influenced by a mix of cognitive, social, and environmental factors. The image you see here captures children playing together, reminding us that these developmental processes happen in real-life, everyday settings. Let's dive into understanding how gender impacts growth and development across these crucial years. Here's an overview of what we'll cover in this presentation. We'll begin by setting the stage with an introduction to gender similarities and differences, followed by a look at the key theoretical frameworks. Then, we'll explore gender development across different life stages, starting with infancy and early childhood, including the influences of parents and peers. Next, we'll move into middle childhood and discuss the role of parents, language, and peer interactions. After that, we'll examine adolescence, focusing on the impact of parents, media, and peers. Finally, we'll consider directions for future research before wrapping up with a conclusion. This structure will help us understand the complex process of gender development throughout childhood and adolescence. On this slide, we're focusing on gender as a fundamental social category that exists in every culture around the world. Generally, we divide people into male and female categories, though how these categories are defined can vary from one society to another. What's important to understand is that gender is not just about biology, it shapes how people are seen and treated in their communities. One key point here is that the status of these gender groups is unequal globally. In most societies, men tend to have more power and higher status compared to women. This inequality influences many areas of life, from leadership opportunities to everyday social interactions. The image here helps us see this in a real-world context. It shows people interacting in a park, and just like in any social setting, gender plays a subtle but significant role in how people relate to each other. This sets the stage for understanding how deeply ingrained and impactful gender distinctions are in shaping our societies. Here, we're looking at how researchers determine if differences between females and males are reliable. They use statistical tests to see if these differences are likely to be real, not just due to random chance, with a confidence level of at least 95%. That means they are pretty sure the difference is genuine. However, even when differences are statistically reliable, there is still a lot of overlap between the genders. This means that many traits or behaviors are shared, and individuals within each gender vary widely. In fact, most gender differences tend to be small when you consider the whole picture. Meta-analyses, which combine results from many studies, show that culture and context play a big role in shaping these differences. So, it's important to interpret these findings carefully, understanding that gender differences can change depending on where and when you look. The image here, showing children in a traditional setting, reminds us that culture influences how gender is expressed and experienced in everyday life. Here, we explore the major theoretical frameworks that help us understand gender role development. Starting with social role theory, it emphasizes how societal expectations and institutionalized roles, like caregiving or economic provision, shape behavior based on gender, influencing the opportunities and constraints individuals face. Moving on to cognitive-developmental theory, this perspective looks at how children's understanding of gender changes over time, progressing through stages such as recognizing gender identity and eventually achieving gender consistency. Gender schema theory takes a slightly different angle by focusing on how children create mental frameworks or schemas about gender, which then guide how they process information and behave in gender-typical ways. Finally, social cognitive and developmental intergroup theories explain how children learn about gender roles through observation, personal experience, and direct teaching. These theories also delve into how cognitive and social factors can lead to stereotyping and prejudice. Together, these frameworks offer a comprehensive picture of how gender roles develop from multiple psychological and social perspectives. As children approach their first birthday, they begin to recognize differences between men's and women's faces, and shortly after, around 18 to 24 months, they start using gender labels. By age 3, they form their own sense of gender identity. As they move into the preschool years, they develop an understanding of gender constancy, the idea that gender remains the same over time, and begin to adopt gender stereotypes. Around age 2, we see children beginning to show clear preferences in their play, often choosing toys and activities traditionally associated with their own gender. Boys tend to prefer more active toys, while girls often gravitate toward dolls. Their pretend play reflects these patterns as well, with girls more likely to engage in domestic-themed play and boys in action-oriented scenarios. Socially, starting at age 3, children increasingly seek out playmates of the same gender. This same-gender peer preference grows stronger during the preschool years and aligns with their developing gender schemas and social identities. The image here beautifully captures children at play, highlighting these early developmental trends as they explore their world and form their own understanding of gender through social interaction and play. Let's look at how gender development in infancy and early childhood is influenced by 3 important factors: parents, peers, and media. First, parents often act out traditional gender roles at home and encourage their children to engage in gender-typed play activities. Fathers, in particular, tend to promote these gender-specific behaviors more strongly than mothers do. Next, peers play a powerful role as well. They serve as role models and tend to reinforce gender conformity by approving behavior that aligns with gender norms and disapproving of behavior that doesn't. As a result, children spend more time with same-gender playmates, which increases gender-typed behavior. Finally, media such as television, commercials, and storybooks consistently convey gender stereotype messages. These messages shape children's beliefs about what roles and behaviors are appropriate for their gender. Together, these influences create a complex environment that shapes how children understand and express gender from a very early age. During middle childhood, children develop a much clearer understanding of gender as both a stable identity and a social construct. By around age 6, they recognize that gender stays the same over time, and they start to see gender roles as more about what society expects rather than something fixed by nature. At the same time, their self-concepts begin to reflect these ideas. Boys tend to value traits like assertiveness, while girls often emphasize affiliation and relationships. An important factor in this development is their peer groups. Children typically spend most of their time with same-gender friends, engaging in play and activities that align with traditional gender roles. This play reinforces behaviors and attitudes linked to their gender, creating small but consistent differences in things like activity levels, aggression, self-control, and social interactions. So, the social environment during these years plays a key role in shaping how children understand and express their gender. Here we focus on the influence of parents, language, and peers on children during middle childhood. First, parents play a significant role by encouraging gender-typed activities, with fathers often continuing traditional patterns. However, their beliefs and behaviors don't always align perfectly. Mothers also tend to communicate differently with daughters versus sons, using more affiliative and directive speech with girls. Second, language itself shapes how children understand gender. When we use gender labels and gendered terms, it makes gender more psychologically prominent to kids, reinforcing stereotypes in their attitudes. Lastly, peers strongly enforce conformity to gender norms through their approval or disapproval, guiding children's behaviors and the way they communicate socially. This image of children engaging and interacting outdoors illustrates how crucial these social dynamics are for gender development at this stage. Overall, these factors together create the social framework that shapes how children learn and express gender in everyday life. During adolescence, young people begin to incorporate both masculine and feminine traits into their self-concept, which brings more flexibility, particularly among girls. At the same time, we start to see small but important gender differences showing up in areas like self-esteem, depression, and body image. Social relationships also undergo significant changes. There's an increase in cross-gender friendships and heterosexual dating. Unfortunately, this period can also bring challenges, including the rise of benevolent sexist attitudes and exposure to sexual harassment, both verbal and physical. On the cognitive side, adolescents develop a deeper awareness of gender issues. They start to reflect on stereotypes and recognize discrimination, understanding the social consequences more clearly as their thinking matures. This growing awareness is crucial for fostering more equality and challenging outdated gender norms. On this slide, we explore how parents, media, and peers collectively influence adolescents' gender development and social experiences. Starting with parents, they play a significant role by shaping body image concerns in a gender-specific way. For example, they tend to promote different levels of intimacy and autonomy for sons compared to daughters, which can affect how teens view themselves and relate to others. Moving to media influence, adolescents exposed to violent media are more likely to show increased aggression. Additionally, media portrayals, especially those showing idealized female bodies and muscular male figures, have a strong impact on teens' body image and self-esteem. Finally, peers are incredibly powerful in shaping social dynamics. They influence conversations about appearance, engage in teasing and sexual harassment, and reinforce traditional gender norms around masculinity and femininity. Peers also affect patterns of friendship, intimacy, indirect aggression, and co-rumination, which all contribute to an adolescent's social experience. Together, these factors are deeply interconnected during adolescence, guiding how teens develop gendered behaviors and attitudes. On this slide, we focus on the important directions for future research in children's gender development. One key area is understanding how cultural and social structural conditions shape children's awareness of gender roles and the power imbalances that exist. Research shows that many children are aware that men generally hold higher status positions, like all U.S. presidents being men, but their explanations for this vary. Some see it as deserved, while others recognize discrimination. This variation highlights why deeper investigation is needed. Ultimately, this research will help inform social, educational, and legal policies to support the healthy and equitable development of all children, ensuring they grow up with a clear and fair understanding of gender status and equality. As we conclude, it's important to recognize how gender shapes our lives from early childhood through adolescence. This influence comes from multiple sources: gender schemas, social roles, peers, parents, and the media, all working together to shape our beliefs and behaviors over time. These factors don't just guide individual experiences, they also reflect ongoing inequalities that affect how people grow and interact. Understanding this full picture encourages us to think critically about how we can support more equitable environments for children and teens as they develop their identities and navigate the world around them.